quite as far as West Virginia, but close to it. I went to my brother's in Birmingham first, and then I went to Arkansas. That was fun.
Yeah, well, good.
Back,
It'd be a
uh,
good ride. So you're heading on up to West Virginia to see Mary Kay.
yes, yes. We've she sent me her address, and she said, "Now, don't when you put it in GPS, it's going to take you to a road that's closed that you can't get through. So when you get to this convenience store, call me, and I will come down the correct road and take you up the mountain." So they're up on a
Oh, it's a
mountain.
good thing she told you. Otherwise, you would have
I know.
thought you weren't
Who
welcome when you
knows
got to
what
the
would
closed
happen?
road.
I don't know. And so I don't know what all we're going to do. I know they haven't been getting out a great deal, but they have been, doing some things, and they've got nice walking areas around their house, and so I'm throwing my hiking boots in just in case. And my
And you, Mary
hiking.
Kay, have never met in person before?
Oh yeah, no, we have. Yeah,
Oh, you
we did
have?
it at Florida
Oh,
at
okay.
Florida Book Fair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
several years ago when she first came out with A Midsummer Night's Dream. Um,
Hmm.
we bought a copy. My son had done a little portrait of Shakespeare. We took Mary Kay's picture in front of the portrait, holding the book, and so I knew her from that book fair. Um, so of course I've never met Dennis, and I don't know what Dennis thinks about Mary Kay bringing strange women home, but we'll find out.
I'm sure it'll be
Uh,
fine. I'm sure it'll be fine.
uh, so I'd like to try some of. She uses this something called an ink sense pen for some of these circular paintings she does.
Hmm.
And I'd love to try to do something with that. Those are the most beautiful colors. And I'd like to try to do something with that. And we're doing knitting. We're taking our knitting. And
Well,
uh,
we have a bookstore here in Portland called the Backstory Book and Yarn,
oh,
and
really?
yeah, and it's a great little bookstore that does exactly that. She, during the day she sells books, and at night she gives knitting classes,
Just
and
did
she
well,
sells about 50-50 of books and,
yeah,
exotic yarns in her store.
yeah.
It's great when people can take their passion and say,
Right, right,
I don't
right.
have to be a traditionalist. I could do what I want that makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm planning on stopping. If I see antique malls or bookstores or whatever, I'm going to do a little bit of research tonight, and I'll stop along the way. And I'm gonna go tomorrow north of Knoxville and spend the night. Um, I've got some things I've got to do in the morning, and so it's probably going to be around 2 before I get away. But I'll go 3 hours or so up past Knoxville, and I've got reservations up near Sevierville, and I'll spend the night there. And
Well, good. Have a
which will,
good, safe trip.
I'm really looking forward to it. Uh, they're expecting freezing temperatures a couple of nights while I'm there, and I'm looking forward to some cool weather. It's been nice here this week. It's been cooler. It's been very,
Bring your
very,
long
very pleasant.
johns.
I don't think I'll need those. I did, however, we had a very mild winter last winter, and I didn't wear coats very much. And I got my little puffy jacket out and discovered that all the puffy had settled to the bottom. And so I had this ring of stuffing around my hips. And so I did buy a new jacket. Uh, I went down to the local Walmart and purchased a $25 jacket to take with me.
Very good.
So
Well, I'm excited. I'm going to have a
pumped.
ring of stuffing around my hips here in about 4 weeks.
Oh,
Stuffing is one of my favorite Thanksgiving
ah,
side dishes.
yes. Well, we've had ever since Clara was born, and she's almost 9. We've had Thanksgiving dinner with my son's in-laws, and stuffing or dressing, as we refer to it around here, is my assignment for it. And some years we do regular cornbread dressing and oyster dressing. And last year I did a sausage apple pecan one in addition to
Oh,
the
that's my favorite.
standard one. And they do an air fried turkey outside, and everybody brings stuff, and so it is very nice we started it so that the kids didn't have to haul the babies around, to more than one house.
Sure.
But I just love it because that means all the mess is at somebody else's house. And I start Dickens Village over Thanksgiving. So my son and his brother-in-law will come over and set all the tables up for me. And then I can start work on it. And we'll have it probably within a week to 10 days. We'll have it up, I hope. I hope so.
Well, I appreciate you running the show while I was gone. Thank you very much.
I listen. I don't know if you've seen any of it, but Richard and I had these long discussions on things. We talked for nearly an hour. One show about regional collecting. We didn't really mean to do an hour, but we just kind of got into it, and it was just pretty much us for that show. And so we just kept going, and we've talked about things we've bought, and we had a good time. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad you're back. But
well, I got the I bought the West Point game from Richard, and nobody. I took pictures of it, sent it to my classmates. Nobody's ever seen one before.
Wow.
Quite unique.
Have you read Robert E. Lee and Me by Ty Sedgley?
No, I haven't.
It's fairly new.
I read Lee. The only thing I've ever read was Lee's Lieutenants.
Okay. He taught at West Point. He's from Virginia, but he grew up practically worshiping Robert E. Lee.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Washington and Lee to college. He was a career Army officer. He taught history at West Point, and over the years started questioning this adoration of Lee and Lee's and what he thought about Lee, and has written this long book with the conclusion that Lee was a traitor if all you do is look at the fact that he did not uphold his oath to the Army. It's an interesting book. We read it for book club back in September. And if you get a chance to read it. I'd like to know from a West Point view, kind of what you think about the things that he said, particularly as there's a lot that pertains to West Point in the book.
Well, maybe I'll do that. Coincidentally enough, on my way back from my trip, I stopped in Washington, D.C. to see my son and new grandson. And as I was roaming around the city, I went by the Willard Hotel, which has been in the news recently. Yes. And there on the front of the Willard Hotel is a plaque that talks about some of the history of the hotel. And apparently, Robert E. Lee was offered command of the U.S. Army, of the Northern Army.
Right, yeah.
In that hotel.
Oh, in that hotel.
In that hotel just a few weeks before Fort Sumter.
Wow. Well, the book is just fascinating.
And I have to tell you, I won't say that I actually revered Lee, but I certainly respected him for his military genius and his accommodation of the troops as I was going through school in my first couple of years in the Army. And I don't want to say that I became woke, but I would say that I probably became more understanding of history in depth as the years went on.
Mm-hmm. Well, here we were, a group of Southerners raised in the Lee tradition, greatest Army person ever, kind of thing. All of us tending to agree with Sedgley about the things that he said. And one thing that I think really was interesting was how Lee's approval of slavery continued after the war, and his support for the whole plantation system and things continuing after the war, which was very interesting. But we liked the book a lot, and I know that Sedgley has gotten a lot of flack from a lot of different groups about it, but he started it out just as a lecture that he gave, and actually retired so that he could write the book.
Well, there's an old anecdote, a piece of trivia that says Robert E. Lee was the only cadet to have gone through West Point and never gotten at least one demerit. And as a recipient of double-digit demerits, I always respected that. I don't know how he did it.
Yeah.
All right, Lee.
I think we have counted down, and so welcome everyone to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. We're the only weekly internet program devoted entirely to rare and collectible books and all things associated with them, and the people who love them. And of course, that's you, and that's all of us as well. And be sure to leave us a comment or suggestions, or even just where you're watching us from. We love to hear what you'd like to see on the show, and like to hear what you think about what we're doing. We are on every Saturday, starting at 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern, or 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time, if that's how you figure your time zones. And we can be found on YouTube, on Facebook, and on the podcast, Rare Book Cafe Raw, wherever you get your favorite podcast. So we look forward to sharing this time with you every Saturday. I'm your host, at least for right now, Lee Lynn of the Ridge Books in Calhoun, Georgia. And we're so happy to welcome back our regular host, Ed Markiewicz from Montgomery Rare Books in Portland, Oregon. And he's back from his travels in Greece, Italy, and the Balkans. And he'll be sharing with us some of his adventures on this show this week, as well as weeks to come. So it's good to have you back. And we followed the first few weeks of your travels, and I know it got difficult to send in dispatches from the trip, but we'll look forward.
Yeah, I had some internet problems.
Yeah. Well, now I get to go on vacation, and I'll be in West Virginia, and I know that Mary Kay's internet is a problem too. So we're not sure what we're going to be able to send back, but we're going to try to have something for you for next week. From up there. We also today have joining us Barbara Lowe of Cardtique. And the last couple of weeks we've been talking about ephemera related to children's books. And Barbara, who specializes in Victorian ephemera, is going to talk about pieces from that era that are related to children. And she is going to join us now.
Hi. So today I'm going to talk about children's, the use of children in advertising trade cards. So this was a very common theme back in the 1880s, and they would use children to advertise anything and everything. So here's an example of an item that actually was for children. It's the Young Folks Drawing Book, and it features kids using the drawing book. But at the other end of the sampling, you have kids. Here's an example where they're using Kids at Play to advertise tea. This was for the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, or as we know it today, A&P. Another example is here, the company was advertising industrial insurance for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, and their ad, the back of which is showing all the statistics about the insurance company, but on the front, to get people's attention, they're showing kids. This was very, very common. This is an example, there we go, of the Van Houten Cocoa Company. And again, using kids to promote the use of their product. Another one is, a lot of you have seen the Heinz pickle cards, and each one featured a different product that Heinz promoted. And they used almost exclusively children. There are a few that have adults on them, but it was the children that were used to promote the product. This is true across the board. Here's an example where they used the artwork of C.D. Bird to promote Bartholomew ice cream. And there were a whole series of these with different prints of his and or her, I should say. I'm not sure whether that was a man or a woman artist, but were used to promote food. This is an example of one where they're promoting a washing machine. And you frequently would see children in these product ads so that they could show just how simple and easy it was. So by all means, you have the large estate and you have the girls out there, and she's wearing her full-length dress, her hat, her boots, and she's mowing the lawn. And the whole idea was to promote how easy it was to use the product. These ads that featured kids were not just focused on adult products, as I said, with the lawnmowers and things. This is promoting coffee, Lion Coffee. And a lot of famous artists were involved in doing these. And you saw over and over these ads. Here we are promoting a furnace company, a coal company. And you have to ask yourself, well, what do kids in a Christmas tree have to do with best coal? But it was strictly to get the people's attention to pick up the card so that they could advertise their product. Here's another example that I like. Again, you see the girl mowing the lawn on the estate while the adults are playing croquet. It was so easy to use the lawnmower that she's out there doing this job while the adults are at play. And here's another example where we're promoting the bathtub and Sanitas and how easy it is to clean it with a child. Here's an example of one by Maud Humphrey, a very famous artist at the time. And also Frances Brundage did a lot of these ads. And here's a Frances Brundage. And the whole idea, again, this is for coffee, is to get your attention to look at the product by the use of the kids. Here is, let's see, there you go. And what they're promoting here are Perkins windmills. So the use of children in advertising had nothing to do with the products involved and everything to do with making an attractive image that would get people's attention, and so that they would take a look at the product. There's hundreds and hundreds of these out there. And here's one showing the kids with Santa Claus and kids at play. That was a frequent theme that you would see, either kids using a product or at play. And they could be advertising any products that you could imagine. Here we have a clothing company, and they're showing the kids out ice skating. Here's one where they actually turned the children into a toy that the kids could use. This was for Willimatic thread. And when they picked this up, they could cut this out, and then the kids would actually have a paper doll with different outfits and different accessories that they could use. And this was prevalent this is a French card for Au Bon Marché. And you saw these themes over and over in English cards, French cards, all over. And it was the use of children was just really important to promote their products, regardless of what the product was or how it was being used. Here's an example of a publisher using it to promote their books. This is the Curtis Publishing Company. Here's Starin's excursions, which was a big resort type situation where they were trying to get people to go out to the resort and vacation. And again, what's the primary image? It's the kids at play. Here's another coffee ad. So it was just very, very common to use children in promoting these products, even to the point of, in this particular case, alcohol. And so the use of children in advertising was very prevalent, very common, and used for decades as a way to promote the products. And we see it consistently throughout the Victorian trade card era, where they were using the children for all types of things. Now, this actually happens to be an ad for children's clothes, so that makes sense. But they used them for everything. This is an example where what they're selling are dyes and washing things. So the use of kids was very, very common in advertising. And we enjoy these images today because they give us an insight into the view of what I'm going to say upper middle class to upper class children's existence was. Because obviously, if you were in the poorer classes, you were not going on excursions and you were not dressing up in sailor suits and things like that. You were this was definitely aimed at the middle and upper classes with their advertising. So that's my little presentation today on the use of children in advertising.
Barbara, right. We're so glad to see you today and look forward to hearing from you. And of course, we have our weekly segment, Things Found in Old Books, by David Hess of the Bookman in Orange, California. And today he has a KISS trading card, a King Tut exhibit card from 1978 at the Los Angeles County Museum, and a group of 1942 military humorous postcards, one of those accordion fold collections of postcards. That a soldier sent evidently to his girlfriend, and he'll be sharing that with us. But he also found in a book, The Fundamentals of Book Collecting by Dunbar, a business card belonging to John McLaughlin of the Book Sale, SAIL, in California, who was a leading bookseller in, I'm not sure the date of the card, but was a leading bookseller in California. And let's see. Oh, on the military postcards, they were sent from Camp Bowie, Texas, by a young man named Charles Wilson. So David's going to have all of that for us today. And David, we'll turn it over to you now.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California. Welcoming you to the show today and Things Found in Old Books. Today we found some things in old books. Well, books aren't that old, but we did find some stuff. So right off the bat, Body Language 101. We found this as a bookmark. What it is, it's a KISS, the musical group, trading card. And that was from 1978. It's on there somewhere. Yeah, 1978. So there, back in 78, you were buying KISS trading cards. And this is one. And on the back, you probably a much larger puzzle. When you get them all together, you create a big picture. All right. The next thing we found in Fundamentals of Book Collecting, kind of a classic in book collecting. It's a nice book. It's by Maurice Dunbar, who wrote a number of books on book collecting. And inside was a little magazine published by Reader's Digest. There's no date on the magazine, but the book is from '76, and the magazine, the advertising on the back, old '70s cars and stuff like that. And what it is a little excerpt from The Devil and Daniel Webster by Stephen Vincent Benet with the famous Fritz Eichenberg illustrations. And it gives you a little excerpt of the book. And I'm not sure why they were promoting this in Reader's Digest, but there it is. And it's a brief little magazine with an excerpt of the book and a few '70s ads. And I thought it was interesting, and it's called a fiction classic. Also in the same book was a business card from the book sale here in Orange, California, right where I'm at. Actually, his location was a little further down the street than mine. Back in the early '90s, and before the internet, there was like 30-some bookstores here in Orange County, and now there's only about 3 or 4. But the book sale, it says John McLaughlin, head bookie. And some of you might have heard of John McLaughlin. He was kind of big in the antiquarian trade, and he had a lot of famous items in his house. I went to his house once. It was like a museum. John McLaughlin has long since passed away, and it was good to see his card there and remind me of some of the old timers that I grew up as a young bookie. And then we have this book here called Wonderful Things. It's a discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, and it looks like something you might have bought at the museum when you went and saw the display, because inside is a brochure for the treasures of Tutankhamun. You know what? I can never get King Tut. How about that? It was from 1978. The first time King Tut came out here, because he's been here one other time. And inside of the brochure is the ticket stub for Wednesday the 11th, 1978, April. And it cost $2 to get in. I think now it would be more like $40 to get in. But it was at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. So there's his ticket, there's his brochure, and there is his magazine. And finally, from the archives of things found in old book, years ago, I came across this thing here. Now, it's called From 1 in a Million. And it's addressed to George Wilson in St. Joseph, Missouri. It says, I'm in the Army now. And it's dated, or a stamp dated up here, 1942. And what it is, it's a postcard of many postcards. They're all humorous in nature about life in the service in the boot camp, and all like how it felt that first night in camp. It's got a little guy here, and I like the one where the let's see here. I like one of these. Oh, the guy, he says, "Say, buddy," he walks up to an officer, the private. "Say, buddy, how do I get an outfit like yours?" Yeah, and I thought this was pretty cool, very colorful, and had a place right here for a handwritten message, and it was written in pencil, and the writing is kind of sloppy. It was a little bit hard to decipher, but I did. And what I did is I typed it up here so I can read it to you. But on the right here it says, "Well, George, we'll write you a few lines. I am in Camp Boy, Texas. We have been here about a week. I am okay and hope this finds you the same. How's everything in St. Joseph? Well, I will close hoping to hear from you soon. From Private Charles Wilson to George Wilson, St. Joseph, Missouri. And it wasn't a lot for words, but he did write home, and it was probably very nice to hear from him. Camp Boy in Texas, or Bowie or whatever, is still there today. And at one time, this young gentleman was there and just got into the Army in 1942. I hope he made it out okay. Anyway, that's all I have for today. And if there's anything that you would like to share, please feel free to send it along. Send a photograph and a little blurb about what you found and how you found it, and I will include it in this broadcast. Just get a hold of me at oldbook@ebookman.com. That's oldbook@ebookman.com. That's all I have for today. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.
Lynn, I have to tell you, the other thing I love about the Bookman in Orange, California, is his Instagram page. And on his Instagram page, he often has customers, clients with their T-shirts. And they are some of the most rad and funny T-shirts you'll ever want to see. Folks, if you're not following the Bookman on Instagram, hook up with him. It's always good for a giggle.
His T-shirts always tend to relate to what he's sharing with us on things found in old books.
Exactly.
You know, he has quite a collection. And we are also hoping to do a segment with David on his drawings that he...
Ooh, I don't know anything about that.
Well, they're on his Facebook page, and they're humorous little drawings. Very, very interesting. And so Alan has talked to him about doing a segment on those. And
he does the drawings himself?
He does the drawings himself. And I think I'm going to be working on that with David for a future show.
What a talented guy. I had no idea.
Yeah,
I hadn't even seen that.
Well, take a look on his Facebook page, because that's where you can see them. And let's see.
Well, you know, there's just so many social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I can't keep up with all of them.
I don't try to keep up with them. I have other things. There's real life going on out there. I think we get so much of that.
And somewhere in between, we actually have to sit down and read a book.
We do. And somewhere in between, we actually have to write up all these books we bought so that we can make enough money to go on vacation again. If only that. And something else that has come up just this week, our Rare Book Cafe friend, Larry Baker from Iowa, who is a big Flannery O'Connor fan, and we've had him on talking about Flannery, is also a writer. And his newest book has just come out, and it is right here, Wyman and the Florida Nights. And today is the official publication date, but his publisher, which is IceCubePress.com, has had them for a couple of weeks, has had signed copies with free shipping. And so that was how I got mine.
Congratulations, Larry.
They're signed. And
nice.
he's going to be doing some book signings and events in Florida, I know, and Iowa. And anyway, I haven't read it yet, but I really enjoyed his books, A Good Man and The Flamingo Rising. And I'm looking forward to this one as well. So we'll have a report on that, and we plan to have Larry on at sometime fairly soon to talk about the book.
And Lee, we can't go without mentioning, even though this is the Rare Book Cafe, that by the time we have our next show on next week, we're going to know whether or not the Atlanta Braves have won the World Series.
Yes, we will. We had a rough night last night.
Yes, you did.
Very rough night. But
you got what you got to love about the series. It's always a back and forth.
Chances.
Nobody wants to see a one-sided series.
But the odds are still on the Astros. In spite of the fact, even when we were ahead 3-1. The odds were still on the Astros, but we're doing our best. You know, I had a bet with Alan with his Rays and my Braves, and we had decided it would be whoever got the furthest. And of course, Atlanta surpassed the Rays quickly in the playoffs. And so he owes me a Cuban sandwich and a pitcher of sangria. And I'm going to St. Petersburg in January to do an antique show that Richard Mori is putting together of about half a dozen booksellers as part of that show. So Richard decided that he claimed part of it because it was his Reds. Whoops. Oh dear.
Well, make sure he throws in dessert, and there's nothing wrong with 2 Cuban sandwiches, 2 pitchers of sangria, and 2 desserts. So Richard, you hear that, Alan?
Yeah. So Richard is joining us on this because he thought that his Reds had contributed to the fact that the Rays did not get any further than they did. So we have that to look forward to in January.
Sounds like fun.
I think that's going to be fun.
And I'll tell you what, if the rain doesn't let up here in Portland, I'm coming too, and we're going to make it 3 pitchers of sangria and 3 Cuban sandwiches.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. We've had a lot of rain lately too. Last week it rained almost every day. Then it cleared up mid-afternoon yesterday for Halloween, and was very cool and very pleasant. And it's just a lovely day today. I'm working at the Art Center getting the Festival of Trees ready to open, which is opening today. And it's hard to believe we have 90 Christmas trees and other assorted Christmas decorations the 1st of November. But I guess if Walmart can have theirs up, we can too. So I've been down there this morning, and it was in the high 50s. It was very, very pleasant outside.
So Lee, you said that you were going to be heading up to West Virginia, and you're going to start Googling some bookstores along your route. You know, last week when I was in Washington, D.C., I stopped by Second Story Bookshop and Capitol Hill Books. There's just something that almost compels us to go visit a bookstore when we're out of town. Isn't there?
Yeah, it's I know you can't walk by one. You cannot walk by one, and there are places where it's hard to find one, which is too bad. But so many independent bookstores, you know, have gone out of business, and so many of us, like me and you, work from home, and you know, I'm open by appointment, but nobody's been making appointments the last year. So, but a lot of people that, you know, that I know, particularly in the Atlanta area, who used to have bookstores, are now strictly online and shows.
Well, not only can you not walk by one, once you get inside, you almost cannot buy something.
I know.
You know, if you've got one of your brother booksellers there, it's almost inappropriate not to pick
not
something.
To buy something. It is, and I get that way about art shows as well. I feel like, you know, I go to shows that my son is exhibiting in, and I feel like I have to buy something. And actually, I bought 2 little pieces to take to Mary Kay and Dennis, a piece of my son's work and a piece of from some artists at the Art Center here, a piece of pottery. So
I was very fortunate at Capitol Hill Books. He has a warehouse across the river in Maryland, and he says, "Why don't you come on over to the warehouse? We've got 4 or 5 times as many books as we do in the store." And of course, most of the books in the warehouse haven't been cataloged yet.
Yeah.
So it's always nice to pick up a few things that don't exist on the internet anywhere, and maybe you can add them to your own portfolio of books for sale.
Yeah. That's.
And I did.
Fun. I'll bet you did. I'll bet you did. Well, I'm going prepared to shop, and since I'm driving, I'm not going to have to worry about shipping. I have an SUV. Yeah. I have plenty of room. So,
too much room. You know, one of Murphy's laws is stuff expands to fill up the space.
I know. Of course, I am taking a lot of clothes you don't ever know what you're going to need. And if you're not flying and don't have to worry about, hauling this little tiny suitcase around, you can take whatever you want to. So I'm prepared for any events, I think. So anyway, I think it's going to be fun. So,
all right, what's coming up next on our show, Lee?
Well, next on our show today, I think we have, Richard. We have Richard. Richard Mori, the road warrior, was out and about at shows again last weekend. He's supposed to be sending us a video. I think we have a video of his.
Okay.
And what Richard probably will show us is what he usually does, which is what he's bought. And he has he's had a lot of interesting things lately. He's bought a lot of children's material lately, we've seen. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things he was doing this weekend was a Boy Scout event.
That's right.
Yeah, where they serve lobster. He had brought that up earlier, and so we'll have to see what he's found there.
Well, speaking of traveling, it's been fun for me to get back. Not really. I've had a wonderful time. I had to put on a lot of miles, air miles, train miles, car miles, shoe leather miles, and hope to share that with everybody a little bit more in a literary way, not in a, hey, anybody want to see my vacation pictures way.
We probably do, though.
Yeah, well, I'll include some of them in what I had. But what a fantastic trip. And I have to tell you, one of the things that in the book world that really impressed me is how many commercial bookstores there are in the places that I visited, especially places like Serbia, Bosnia, Hungary. The people in those countries must be great readers, because there were multiple bookstores on many of the downtown city streets that I traveled. It was very impressive.
Do you think that
the other thing?
I was just wondering, do you think that some of that is because they do not have quite as much access to digital material? So many folks seem to read on Kindle and things, and you think that
may be. They certainly have access to digital. One of the things that very much impressed me is every single restaurant, cafe that I walked into had free Wi-Fi. So you walk in, and usually there's a sign right there at the door, or there's a sign on the menu. This is our Wi-Fi. This is our password, or maybe it was an open Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is very ubiquitous across these countries. Now, I was wondering why, and I spoke to somebody, and they said maybe it's because they don't have the all-inclusive digital plan like you can get for Verizon here, unlimited digital. But Wi-Fi is very prolific across everywhere I went. But there is a very long history tradition of Balkan writers, and I hope to do one of my segments on the show. Many of the places that I went to were bronze statues of their literary heroes on pedestals or on the street side, and I'm going to share some of those perhaps next week's show. So they do have a very long and rich tradition of literary classics in their own languages. That's for sure.
Well, good. Something is beeping. I don't know. Okay. Well, I think the only other thing that we have then will be your segment on. I know you have some photos from your trip, and we'll start talking to us about that. And I think
as I said, next week I hope to do a segment on some of the literary heroes of, I will call it the old Yugoslavia. And this week, what I would like to share is one of my favorite stops on the trip in Corinth, Greece.
Okay.
Corinth is a city right at the isthmus of the Peloponnese Peninsula and the mainland of Greece. And some of the finest archaeological sites of Greece are still located here in Corinth. And of course, I couldn't help but think while I'm there of St. Paul writing his letters to the Corinthians. So I'm going to tie that into to some of the things that I visited on the trip. Oh no, Richard Mori today. Our road warrior Richard Mori has run into a problem and he's not going to be able to join us. Sorry about that, folks, but we'll catch up with him. I think he's down in Florida. I think he was at some sort of Boy Scout configuration, and I know he was looking forward to some seafood down there, but apparently Richard's not going to make it. So you're stuck with me for a couple of more minutes. Well, as you know, I have been away for about 7 weeks, and I have had the very fortunate opportunity to do some traveling in the Balkans. And that was from the south of Greece all the way north up to Hungary, which literally is not in the Balkans, but it's adjacent to it, or at least what the current Balkan states are. And those travels took me to Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia and Hungary, and it took me to the Republic of Srpska. I didn't even know there was a Republic of Srpska, but there is. Look it up. SKRSPKA. SRPS K-A, a 6-letter word with only one vowel. Now, the interesting thing about the Republic of Srpska, which came out of the Bosnian War, it's two geographies that are not connected. It's kind of shaped like your two lungs, only there's no esophagus. It's a really interesting country. There's also no coastline. But anyways, I digress. One of the wonderful places that I got to visit on this trip was the city of Corinth. Go ahead, Alan, put up that first slide. Corinth was a city-state, a polis, P-O-L-I-S, and I'm sure you recognize that word from being the root word for pols or politics or political, on the Isthmus of Corinth. Alan, go ahead and throw up that little map there. Now, the Isthmus of Corinth is a 17-mile little tab of land between the Peloponnese Peninsula and the mainland of Greece. It's about halfway between the cities of Athens and Sparta, the two large major city-states. The modern Corinth is located about 5 kilometers, about 3 miles northeast of the ancient ruins of which you are going to see some photos here shortly. And since 1896, archaeological investigations of the Corinth excavations have been conducted by the American School of Classical Studies at Athens, and the Greek Ministry of Culture have both brought to light some very important new facets of that antiquity. Now, it's not my intention to give you a travel log and show you slides. Remember the old days, our parents used to go on vacation and show 35 millimeter slides to the neighbors while they fell asleep on the couch. That's not my intention today. I've only got a few slides, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about Corinth and a little bit about art and a little bit about books and rare books and history, because that's what this show is all about. But the background for me, being the historical part, is really the fascinating part, which is why the objective of my trip was to visit as many UNESCO heritage sites as possible, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, of which Corinth and Mykonos and some of the other cities there on the Peloponnese are known. Now, the other thing that's very interesting about Corinth is that for Christians, Corinth is well known for the 2 letters of St. Paul in the New Testament, the first and second letters to the Corinthians. Corinth is also mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles as part of Paul's apostolic ministry and travels. In addition, Pausanias, who was the 2nd century Roman historian, dedicated an entire book about Corinth, which ran to about 12 volumes, I believe, in the description of Greece. And he devoted one of those books entirely to Corinth. Now, one of the very first things you see when you buy your ticket to go onto the property, and it wasn't much, it was $4 or $5, and believe me, it was totally worth it, is the route takes you through the museum. And here you can see in this photograph both sides of the wall, both sides of the aisle and both sides of the wall adorned with ancient artifacts that have been since recovered in and amongst the ancient city. It was once one of the largest and most important cities of Greece with a population of 90,000. Imagine that, 90,000 people by the year 400 BC. Next slide, Alan. The Romans came in 146 BC and destroyed the city. And it was not rebuilt again until Julius Caesar, just before he died in 44 BC, made it the capital of provincial Greece. So it was a very important city to many people. Next slide, Alan. The Neolithic pottery on the site suggests that Corinth may have been occupied as early as 6,500 BC. So 8,500 years ago, people were living in this village, creating pottery, doing trade, and carrying on their lives. And it was continually occupied into the early Bronze Age, when it was really the center of trade because it was on the route there and it's such a strategic spot on the Peloponnese. However, there was a dramatic drop in the pottery remains that were found during the early Hellenic phase, and it's believed that perhaps the city may have been taken over by Mycenae. Alan, next slide, please. Oh, no, this is a good one here. Obviously, Greece is the resource, the home, the origination of the novel, the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. But not everybody wrote, not everybody read. So, of course, the stories that the Greeks told were told through other medium, sometimes other than writing. One was mosaics, and here you see the story of the faun Pan in this mosaic. Next slide, Alan. Here you see some ancient pottery, the stories, which were often the stories of the myth that was verbally passed down from generation to generation with the aid of these three-dimensional objects like this pottery. This one, I believe, told the story of the Minotaur. Next one, Alan. Mosaics, of course, happen to be my favorite of all the mediums that were artistically used to share the history of their country and the history of their mythology. Next one, please, Alan. Now, I mentioned that Julius Caesar declared that Corinth would be the capital in 44 BC. This was a statue of Julius Caesar, missing the arms and the legs and the heads, not uncommon as conservative eras took over. It was not uncommon for these things to destroy. Of course, they may have fallen over in an earthquake and destroyed themselves, but as invading armies came through and conquering soldiers would lop off the heads of these soldiers. It's a shame that some of these great artifacts have since been lost and destroyed. But just look at the tremendous torso on this statue, and I mean, this was carved about 1600 years before Michelangelo, and it was equally, well, not equally as great as Michelangelo, but it certainly was quite impressive. Next slide, Alan. And here you can see a cabinet in the museum that shows some of the lopped off heads and arms and hands and legs of some of the statues that are left behind. Next one, please. So this is the northern gate to the great city of Mycenae. The city of Mycenae, the home of Agamemnon, the king of the Greek warriors who attacked Troy with the armies of Greece, lived in this city, which is about 35, 40 miles south of Corinth. It seems likely that Corinth was a sub-state of the great state of Mycenae. Now, myths play a very important role, a very important part in the storytelling and the history of Corinth. And here we see a statue of Zeus, who was equally important, according to Corinthian myth, at least as told by Pausanias in his 2nd century AD volume. The city was founded by Corinthos, a descendant of the god Zeus. However, there are some myths that suggest it was founded by a goddess instead, the goddess Ephyra, a daughter of Titan Oceanus. Thus, in the early days, the city was named Ephyra. It seems likely that Corinth was the site of, Sisyphus. We all know of Sisyphus, who was the Greek god who ticked off Zeus and had to spend eternity rolling the rock up the hill. Well, it was suggested that he was the founder of an ancient race of kings who ruled Corinth sometime prior to the 900s when recordings began to be kept. And it's also said that in Corinth, Jason, who was the leader of the Argonauts, abandoned Medea. There are also some Greek myths about the possession of Corinth amongst the gods. One tale has it that Poseidon, the god of the sea, and Helios, the god of the sun, argued over whom the city belonged to. That's how great and productive and fruitful that it was. Well, Helios won that contest, and hence a monument was built to the sun god and erected at the highest point of Old Corinth. Another tale has it that Zeus, being the bad boy that he was, had ravished a young maiden named Aegean. Not the first time in Greek mythology, I think we've heard of Zeus ravaging young maidens. However, as a result of this commingulation, a spring burst forth in Corinth, and there is evidence of such a spring behind the Acropolis. This is the very same spring where the winged horse Pegasus was drinking from when he was captured and tamed by the Corinthian hero Bellerophon. I think that's what it was, Bellerophon. So anyways, the city of Corinth is filled with magical histories and mythical stories, replete with carvings that were found in the city that retell those stories. Next slide, Alan. So the Corinth here we see once again between Athens became a Bactrian-ruled city somewhere around, the date is put at 747 BC, and it was quickly followed by a series of benevolent dictators. They were actually called tyrants, who were corrupt on one side but benevolent on the other. And they continued to rule these cities, these Greek city-states, through the year 400. The city-states tended to be overthrown by their traditional hereditary priest kings. It was very complicated. Corinth led the way as one of the richest polis. The tyrants claimed the populace by upholding existing laws, and it really became a cult of personality among these tyrants. And they fought for the legitimate control of the House of Corinth, very similar to what happened in Renaissance Italy, when Medici's or others fought for and gained control of Roman Italian city-states. Okay, we're going to switch this a little bit. Next slide, Alan. Here we see something called the rostra or the bema. The bema has been partially restored by the Classical Antiquities Group and other foundations of conservation, because this is traditionally thought to be the spot where both St. Paul and the Christian church not only preached from, but also where he was condemned. Well, not condemned, he was put on trial by the Jews. St. Paul, he was known as the Apostle of Nations because of his missionary trips throughout Eastern Mediterranean for the dissemination of Christianity. In this context, he visited several Greek cities, including Samothrace, Philippi, Thessalonica, Macedonia, Athens, and most importantly, Greek. It's believed that he lived here for 18 months. And, Paul's side gig, his side hustle, was being a tent maker. And he hooked up with a couple of other tent makers and plied his trade here throughout the days. I think the other tent makers were named Aquila and Priscilla. And at the same time, from this very spot of the slide that you're viewing, he preached the gospel of Jesus to the Jews. Now, much as Jesus had done in Jerusalem, the Jews weren't too keen on that. So they reported him to the authorities, happening to be at that time the Roman proconsul Lucius Gallio, on the accusation of conducting illegal teachings. Now, Gallio, much like Pontius Pilate, refused to judge Paul doing what he considered to be mere religious dispute among the Jews. And according to tradition, the site of Paul on the Benna, this elevated site in the Roman Forum, is where all of that took place. Let's see here. Now, let's get close to finishing up this portion here and talk about the literature portion of what went on here. And that has to be the two very famous letters, the first and second letter of Paul to the Corinthians, which was likely written from Macedonia in 55 CE. Some biblical scholars think there were actually 4 letters written, because the last 3 chapters of the second letter aren't really quite consistent. So they seem to have been maybe cut and pasted, should we say, from a previous letter. But as the Christian Council went on in the final Bible, they came up with 2 of these letters. And while he was in Corinth, it's believed, Paul wrote 2 letters to the Thessalonians. So the historical aspect of Corinth in the Christian church is really huge. I just want to finish up with a portion of those 2 letters. Why? It's because they are so famous. If you are a Christian and were married in a Christian church, it's likely that you had a portion of these letters read at your ceremony. And even if you haven't, the last sentence of chapter 12 in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians is so well known. It goes something like this: brothers and sisters, strive eagerly for the greatest spiritual gifts, but I shall show you a still more excellent way. If I speak in human and angelic tongues, but do not have love, I am a resounding gong or a clashing cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy and comprehend all mysteries and comprehend all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away everything I own, and if I hand my body over so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. It is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interests. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Next slide, Alan. Next one, which was the one I had intended to have up while I was speaking. But think for a moment, folks. Just close your eyes and imagine Paul standing there on the restrum and preaching to the crowds and writing the letters to the Thessalonians. You know, this wasn't meant to be a religious lesson. It was meant to be a lesson of literature and letters. And but it does happen to be a good lesson of composite love. At the end of the show today, I hope you all call somebody and just say, I love you. What else have we got? All right, folks, that's that part of my trip to Greece. I think if I have a chance to do this again, I'm going to be talking about some of the authors that I encountered in Serbia. When one thinks of Serbia, they don't usually think of high literature, but some of the authors in that country have left their marks. Okay, let's finish up with this segment and bring Lee back in. I'm still waking up at 3:30 in the morning and my days are a little foggy.
Have you gotten all your clothes washed?
Soon. Yes, that will happen soon. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
But I tell you, one of the best things that have come out of the internet, I have to believe, is Airbnb. Just finding places to stay is so easy. You can find anything in your price range. You want to find a place with a washing machine because you have to wash your clothes halfway through the trip. I did Airbnb for 7 weeks and stayed in some very, I don't want to say opulent, but in Florence. I stayed in a very nice place right behind the Duomo. And then when I was traveling on my own, I stayed in some $25, $35 a night places in Sarajevo or Belgrade that were quite adequate for a male traveler who didn't need much more than a bed like me. And of course, I got some reading in on my trip. I read 4 books on the trip. One was The Balkan Ghosts, which is the history, and it talks about the behind-the-scene politics of what happened in the Balkans over the last 500 years and why it is the way it is. And I don't read many books twice in my life, but I had to reread The Agony and the Ecstasy by Irving Stone before I went to Florence.
I haven't read that in a long time.
Yeah, and it's just so good. And there was a line in the book that talked about right behind the Duomo was where the old stone yard was, the old mason yard where they kept all of the marble, and it turns out where Michelangelo carved the David. Well, our hotel was right on the street, and I couldn't help but think I may be sleeping on the exact spot that Michelangelo carved it. Well, 2 floors up. I may have been sleeping on the exact spot where Michelangelo carved the David. Wow. Then I read the autobiography of oh my gosh, I'm sorry, the famous philosopher who won the Nobel Prize, Bertrand Russell. That's who I was thinking of, the great British philosopher and author of Mathematica Principia and winner of the Nobel Prize. Duh, how could I forget that? And then I read a book, I read Houdini's autobiography, in which Houdini talked about exposing charlatans, exposing people who did seances, and exposing many of his peers. He was a very vindictive man, and he always talked down his competitor magicians. Of course, that was the golden age of magic, when there was no real movies and live stage performances were the type of entertainment that people went to. So I got some good reading in on the trip.
Good. Well, I think that about does it for this week. And next week, we'll have more of Ed. We'll have, we hope, dispatches from West Virginia. We hope maybe we'll have Gigi Best back. She's still in the process of getting settled in St. Augustine. But we're hoping to have her back next week as well. And we usually have something on the road from Richard. So we'll look forward to that as well. And
And
thank
let's
you all.
remind our guests that we'd like to hear what they want to, who they want to hear
That's right.
from, and what they'd like
That's
to hear.
right.
If there's any topics, any authors, any bookstores you'd like interviewed, please drop us a line on Facebook and let us know what you'd like to hear.
That's right.
On the
And
show.
We don't mind calling people up and asking. So let us know. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Good. Bye-bye, Lee.